Azure. Just a fast recap of where we're at with Azure. As you all know, we introduced Azure about 2.5 years ago when we were down in, I believe it was Miami, and we said, "Hey guys, you got to look at Azure. It's going to become a major play in our marketplace." And the comment we made was, "Geez, if you don't get into it, at least buy the stock." And the Microsoft stock at that time was $149, and today it's $244. So that was a good decision. And you'll see more and more of Azure becoming more and more of a mainstream. We're starting to see customers starting to ask us for it, and so it's an opportunity for all of us. And I know some of you have had some real good success. So I'm going to turn this over, introduce you to Catherine, and she'll make intros for uh, web shares. Catherine and I have been working together diligently, trying to bring continual added value to the membership. And Catherine, I'm going to turn it over to you and just go from there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dale. Hello, everyone. Glad that you joined today. I'll be very brief because the star of today's webinar is going to be Mike. Mike is your liaison for any questions you may have in regards to Sherweb. I am glad to be working with Dale and the whole organization, but we also have Charles. But let's start by introducing yourself, Mike, and then maybe Charles, you can introduce yourself.
Sure. So I am the kind of point of contact here to get you guys in the door. So any questions that are derived from the conversation today, and I'm assuming there'll be some, it is a pretty ridiculous subject to cover in 45 minutes. So if there's anything, you can find all my contact information on the Tag National site and get in contact with me regardless if you have another point of contact. If the question is in and around Azure and reserved instances, loop to me first. We'll make sure that we get everything squared away, and then I'll make the introduction to the account manager or your point of contact here. Today I do have Charles Langevin on the call. He's our cloud evangelist. Ambassador, sorry. So he's been with us for about 4 or 5 months. Charles, you want to say a little bit?
Yeah, just hi everybody. It's a new role at Sherweb, so I'm here to help you guys position the cloud offering, making sure that you know how to position it, bring value to it, and make the better use of the cloud in your customer presentation and offering.
Pretty much his role has been put in place to better structure the offer from kind of a subject matter expert standpoint. So if we're good to go, I will just begin. Share my screen here. Tag presentation. Did that work? Did that not work? Let's do this. All right. Perfect. So let me know when you can see my screen. I'll reduce that.
Yeah, it looks like you're good. It's good.
Awesome. So there is quite a bit of content in here. The content's been curated by my marketing department. The purpose is to use it as a reference after the fact. So while I'm not going to cover every piece of every slide, the concepts are there, and it's all to build to the finish, which is the new program that we're putting in place to make sure that this product moving forward is seamless for all tag partners. So we already did the introduction. So we're going to cover a bit about Azure Hybrid Benefit for Windows and SQL, talk about what actually an RI is, how the cost savings work and why there's multiple parts, then kind of putting it all together, showing you guys how we're going to start sending you the quotes so that you'll be able to see what you should be looking for in the Azure calculator. One quick sales scenario, some best practices, and then how and why this is all about your profitability, and then Azure Unleashed, which is the new program that we'll be rolling out here. So there is a bunch of slides on hybrid benefit. We're not going to cover all of them. The main things for you to keep in mind is specifically if you have clients that have licenses where software assurance is already on the table, right? That's going to be where you're going to see a lot of savings with the hybrid benefit piece. If you do not have that, this is where some confusions kind of came into play. If those licenses don't have software assurance already, there is some hiccups there. So some people see all the savings for a reservation with Azure Hybrid Benefit, and they just assume that that's the number they're going to get, 80 whatever percent, right? If that's not the case and you don't have SA, that hybrid benefit is greatly reduced, if not zero. So that's the main thing to keep in mind. So whenever we're doing one of these opportunities, it's very important to take what licensing model they have now, your end client, right? Do they have Windows licenses? Do they have SQL licenses? If so, where are they at? What model are they in? And as we've kind of gotten the feel for Microsoft as a whole, they like to make that about as complicated as humanly possible. So this is kind of the main pieces to take into account. And that's just if they're in open value licensing or open licenses, so you bought it through a SPLA agreement, or they've done something through volume licenses, that's really the information that's needed. How to go from point A to point B, leave that up to us, but that's going to be an important part to look at from a Windows OS standpoint, okay? Another thing to keep in mind is Microsoft has added another layer in January. They've started to actually allow CSPs to sell perpetual licenses. So whenever even an opportunity comes for Windows OS, bring all of that stuff to us. If you are leveraging us or whoever your CSP is, right? They're able to position that now, and there's some added value in the flexibility that will come with the CSP model there. So let's just go right through this. So here is kind of why the SA portion is important beforehand. If you don't have the software assurance piece, then all of this is a moot point. The annual costs for software assurance are really expensive, and you're going to run into some clients that have it, some clients that you've positioned it for, right? If you don't have it, we recommend that you do not go with Azure Hybrid Benefits. It's not going to give you desired
You
result.
walked in at the right time. I just sent you an email.
Oh, I haven't checked my email.
Well, I mean, I just 2 minutes ago. I have talked to the new architect. I'm sorry about this confusion,
just
but
mute
the
everybody.
$12,000 just blew me out of my saddle.
Yeah.
So,
All right, so we'll skip to the important stuff. Let's do that. Okay, so we'll get through this portion here. This is all for your referencing point, okay? So it's mainly to help you have the discussion, see where the actual benefit is and how to apply it. So it's more of a how-to guide after the fact. When it comes to quoting this, showing the price point, figuring out the benefits, none of that is needed on your end. Regardless if you engage Nerdio for that or us, we'll actually dive through all of this with you. So by all means, this is just a nice to have after the fact. The main focal points of today is really on how we're going to package RIs, how we're going to help you guys consume it, and what the heck it all means. So just to give anybody that doesn't already know the understanding, there's actually 4 different things to keep into account. So when you have Azure Pay-as-you-go, your consumption is monthly. There are no real price benefits. Let's say there's a bit of a margin built in, but from a flexibility standpoint, what allows you guys to make a large portion of your money, make it look more and feel more like an on-prem deployment, is going to be with a reserved instance. Now, one of the bigger problems that we've had is RIs getting confused on what it actually gets applied to. So it is not, we have a pay-as-you-go deployment, I put an RI on it, I get 70% off the pay-as-you-go section. That's kind of been some of the misconceptions. It's only on the compute portion, so only on the actual machines like you see here. The type of virtual machine, that is what is getting a reservation on it. Your options and what dictates the price point is the length of the contract, where in the United States or globally we put it, and what machine it is. So you have 1 and 3 year intervals that you can select. and also the region itself. So there's in essence, there's two options, US West, let's say. One is cheaper than the other. So if there's no preference on your side, obviously the cheapest alternative, correct? The other piece to keep in mind is how you're going to assign it. So you can assign an RI to the company as a whole or just a specific department. This is really where the savings come into play. So like I'd mentioned, pay as you go, let's say it's one solid amount, correct? When we start getting into the reservation portion, that's where you're going to start to see some real savings. So this here, let's say just RIing the compute and taking the Windows OS licenses and reserving those as well and doing that up front, you can save anywhere up to 70%. Okay. That's why they always put Microsoft puts the nice little line in front of the percentage points, is because all of that is variables. It's not a fixed amount. It is an amount you can see, but Microsoft's funny. Their quotation tool will change what can and can't be reserved every once in a while. So it changes approximately every month or two, which virtual machines with which pools, elastic pool, that kind of stuff, all of that good stuff, and how it's actually reserved. So it's always changing, but by all means, that's kind of the price point we're looking for on the Azure side. So this part here is pretty important. It's where some confusion starts to step in. You're able to reassign. So sometimes people see that and assume that, great, I had an RI put on client X. Client X no longer pays me money. So I'm done with client X. That's kind of a too bad, so sad moment. We can't reassign the resources you put on client X to another customer. It all has to remain in the same tenant. So when they say reassign, they specifically mean to a different department, maybe the company as a whole, as opposed to just, so that rarely clicks in at the size and scope of what we talk to, us and tag partners. Some of this flexibility that Microsoft highlights in reassign is really for a large scale organization. So somebody that has multiple VMs, multiple locations, that flexibility from reassigning, you guys are typically applying an RI to the totality of the company from the start. So that assignment, that kind of flexibility there is kind of non-existent. You can exchange them though. So we can do some specific changes, switching one virtual machine to another. We've done that a few times where, you might have a specific machine that you've reserved and you need more. So you need, you had a D4, now you need a D8. Well, we can cancel that, or what they do, an exchange. So in essence, we are canceling this, but since we're moving to the same thing, it's literally just a credit being applied to the new amount. So that's all done on the back end on our side. So all that you need to come up with is that you want to make the desired change, and our team will handle it for you there. That's the same concept. So that prorated or credited amount can be flipped. We can even change it. Let's say you've set up a 1 year, you don't like it, or the client decided he wanted to sign for 3 years and you want to flip it to a 3-year RI, we can move that around. That's where that exchange comes in. Now, a cancellation can be done at any time. Right now, there's no fee. So if we have set up one, or you have done one in the past with us and there has been a little hiccup, or you didn't need it and we needed to get rid of the machines, you can do that as of right now, and there is no fee on the Microsoft side. But just a heads up, the Microsoft terminology says it can be any day. So typically that could change tomorrow. Obviously we'll inform you of this, but that's kind of the concept we're dealing with, and something to always keep into account is at some point you may set up this client and you may need to cancel. There may be that 12% fee. So this here is really something I built for Azure. I know this looks like complete chaos. What it is it's trying to give you just the desired outcome of a specific environment that you guys might deal with. Now, the reason for this slide and the next one is just to show you that jumping right in, all into a 3-year does not really have the impact that you guys think it does, that anybody thinks it does. The savings does increase, yes, but so does the risk. So this is really what we're going to talk about quickly here. So as you can see, the current environment is 2 physical servers, 16 core, and running 4 virtual machines per physical server. Okay, so that's what we have. Now, if we were to flip this, reserve the pieces, so reserve the VMs, right? And then also do the hybrid benefits. So taking the actual Windows licenses and pulling those in advance, you would see the desired savings down here of 70%. So roughly $4,581 a year, right? Okay, you can even see it here on the nice graph. Now that's with a 1-year contract. That 1-year contract is between you, us, and Microsoft. So like I had mentioned, it is something down the line that's gonna be much harder, it's not going to be as easy as it is right now to make those desired changes if you do need to cancel. So keeping that in mind, right, you have 70% savings. Now, the exact same environment and signing for 3 years only drops it by $800, but that is $800 a month, right? So there is some additional savings. But now, if you don't have the buy-in from the end client for 36 months, you don't have the contractual piece in place for that 36-month interval, the 1 year is much less risk on your side. So what we have seen some partners that have been successful here is they might extend a 1-year RI at the start, give some savings, and then extend a 36-month contract. But this is all stuff that you guys can think about on the back end, and we can also help you with, provide you with best practices. But that's just to keep in mind that that drop was not a huge amount for 24-month further commitment. So that's really what those 2 slides I wanted to highlight there is 1 year to 3 year. The jump is a decent amount. There's an additional amount, but the approximation is only about a 10% decrease for 2 more years of the contract. So putting it all together, obviously the things that we need you to keep in mind when you bring these things to the table, like I had mentioned, is how do we take advantage of Azure hybrid benefits? So most important steps, where are their Windows licenses now? Where are their SQL licenses now? What did they buy? How long ago did they buy it? All of that information is good stuff. And then obviously the desired outcome of how long you want the reservation to be. If you have current clients, it could be a cloud elsewhere. It may not even be Azure, right? You can still take advantage of this. We have options where we can help you. Nerdio can also help as well, migrating you from point A to Azure, and then obviously setting up these RIs. Now, it's the same concept if your Azure is with another cloud solution provider and not Sherweb, and you like how we handhold the process for an RI. We can move that across pretty simply with just paperwork. So let's say it's set up at another provider. It's just paperwork on the back end. It's a billing admin change for the most part. Once that change is made, then we can engage to set up this RI. But the main focal point and the most important piece here is do not try to handle the quote side on yourself. Even if you've seen one and had a good feel 2 months ago, there are changes, like I said, pretty periodically on the Microsoft side. So what wasn't reserved last month may now be reserved. There might be some different things. There might be an additional charge here and there. But the one nice thing to keep in mind is the entirety of the reservation is extended to you as the partner. So Sherweb takes no skin in the game there. So there's no percentage points on our side for that. So if we're able to do it and set it up and it's 72% savings off of what you currently have, that's all going to be reserved and applied to you. So there's no anything for us. So here are 5 questions that we get asked quite often. And it's really just to keep in mind, can you reserve every virtual machine instance? And the answer is no. The reason for that is the A series, G series machines tend to actually be less expensive and pay as you go. So leaving them month to month with no contract is actually cheaper than putting them in a contract. Why that is, no idea, but that's a Microsoft thing. So there's no point in adding those to, to a reservation because you're locking yourself in with absolutely none of the benefit. Does the discount vary by payment terms? Like I mentioned, yeah, it does. There's actually 3 things to keep in mind. It's the VM type. There's quite a big discrepancy from one type to another on cost when you reserve or even pay as you go. The term itself, so the 1 year to 3 year, there's some variation there, and the region that we select. So if you have a preference, then obviously by all means, you know, close proximity to you, right? Or you could even say to potentially have us look at putting it in the cheapest alternative. So while you might be a California partner, you may put it US East or vice versa. That's up to you. But those are the kind of functionality that we can take a look at. But those are the three things that will impact the discount and the payment terms. Can you cancel? Yes. There's a lot of back end here. It's going to be even more so when we have when we have that 12% fee from the Microsoft side. So canceling a reservation will be quite complicated, and there is paperwork. So for that reason there, that's why we're really trying to make sure that we set ourselves up properly from the start. A reason for that is, let's say we did the Windows licenses and SQL licenses through this as well, and you paid in advance. Maybe you paid 3 years, right? And you lose the client. Well, we can cancel the virtual machines and you can recoup everything except for that 12%, let's say. But the other pieces, the components, the Windows and the SQL, that stuff's paid in advance and it cannot be canceled. Microsoft doesn't allow it. So you might, in some instances I've seen, even some of the tag guys, that initial upfront payment is, you know, 9 or 10 grand. Now, if you do that and the environment's not everything you hoped it was, or there's a hiccup on the end client side, that's a lot of money to eat for no apparent reason. So canceling is right now doesn't seem to be a big penalty with the no fees on the Microsoft side. But even without that, there is still some things to consider, and you always want to make sure that you're putting your best foot forward there, that the environment is exactly what the client needs, that they've had some time to get in there, to get a feel for it, that kind of stuff. So what does it cover? This is another big question that we get quite often. So what exactly am I reserving and what are my savings? So there's still lots of pieces that stay in the month-to-month pay-as-you-go side, okay? You're only reserving the compute. So what I mean by that is the reservation, while it will drop your pay-as-you-go payment, obviously quite a bit, substantially, what it's doing is the VM it's applying only to the VM. So if you have 4 virtual machines and we set up an RI, it's going to reserve those 4 VMs for a huge discount, but it's not going to touch some of the pieces that remain in pay-as-you-go. It will have an impact, obviously, but for the most part, that's just something to keep in mind. So what I'm trying to get at is there's still going to be a pay-as-you-go component every month. So you'd still see that. Let's say if you were in your Azure portal, you're still going to see a pay-as-you-go charge. So don't freak out. There's still a possibility everything's good to go, right? You did set up an RI properly. You didn't make a mistake. It's just that there's 2 separate payments. You'll still have that pay-as-you-go component. And can you transfer this to another client? The answer is no. Even the Windows licenses and SQL licenses you buy up front, that's all to stay within that tenant. Okay. So another thing to keep in mind too is once you sign an RI, let's say you signed an RI with somebody other than Sherweb, those are locked in with the provider right now. So Microsoft hasn't made it an easy change. So there's no CSP transfer process for a reservation. So the Azure tenant is kind of stuck where it's at once you sign in. So that's why you want to make sure that all your things are 100% kind of structured and in place, and you're 100% certain of what you're doing. So what we're going to start doing here at Sherweb is we're actually going to send you the link. Now, this link is not for you to do anything crazy with, but what the link is going to do is it's actually going to show you the physical RI quote. So we're going to show you this quote. You'll be able to even potentially toggle through and do what you need to do. We'll show you, let's say you set up a 3-year, right? So we'll show you it. You'll be able to go, okay, so in pay-as-you-go, if I kept everything equal, because this is always a big question, right? So all things equal, this is what it would cost me in pay-as-you-go. Fantastic. All things equal, this is what it cost me in a 1-year reservation. Here's what it cost me in a 3-year. So what you can do is actually see that in real time on your own. So we can do it and you'll be able to kind of pick through it to get some variables, because the most important thing to consider is you always want to be leveraging yourself. What's best practices is take the pay-as-you-go piece and build on top of that. Okay. Obviously, if somebody signs a contract with you from an end client standpoint, by all means, extend some margin. But one of the biggest problems we've had is there's been two that I've known of, that somebody took this price here and gave that price to the end client. Well, that's great and all, but an end client definitely doesn't understand what they're leveraging and what they're using. So if they change this machine to something else and this price now jumps, they may not know that. The other piece is this is an approximation on the Microsoft side. So your effective cost 1 month might be $250. Maybe the pay-as-you-go piece is more that month. You're just kind of shooting yourself in the foot and doing yourself a disservice there. So what you want to make sure of is that you physically have the exact, all this savings is specifically for you. So you take advantage of this. And like I mentioned, if somebody signs a contract for 36-month duration, by all means, give them, 10% off or a 5% discount or something along those lines. But this is an internal thing for you to leverage. So I wouldn't be so keen to kind of drop that price point and show them the savings that in essence is yours. This one here is this is where you can see when we start getting into the hybrid piece. So when everything's set up properly and we know the licenses are good and we've done the Azure hybrid benefit piece, you can see there was a substantial drop there. So that's don't need to worry about that. We can actually help you with that portion of it. And all right, so this is the part that we've been working on the most. Now, regardless of who you leverage for CSP, this is kind of the best practice play moving forward, right? We've been noticing different problems in different avenues, not just tag partners, with every partner that comes to us that wants to do RIs. So the biggest thing and the way we see it as limiting issues is to always start the client and pay as you go. Okay. If you set up their environment and they do a complete month and pay as you go, and at the end of that month, you know that what they need, what they've been leveraging, and what they're using internally is stable, and you see that there's no, you didn't have any crazy changes you needed to make mid-month. You didn't have to add a new machine. You didn't have to do anything like that, and you know it's stable. Then have a discussion with us around RIs. Okay. The reason for that is when partners get excited and want to put an RI from the start, that's where 75% of the problems we see come into play. You set up an RI in an environment, then 2 weeks down the line, you realize that the client can't do something. We had one pop up that was a Zoom issue with how it was set up. So he couldn't do it. Well, now they no longer need this machine. Well, we're only 2 weeks into 36 months. And they don't even have the capabilities that they thought they did 2 weeks ago. So if they would have ran a month in pay as you go, they would have noticed that. They would have been able to change and realized, okay, well, we actually don't need those two things, right? We don't actually need this portion of it. So that it just allows you to be more intelligent with how you're rolling this out, and it allows you to be more proactive. So if you set them up pay as you go, and you know it's good, that's when you can come to them with a contract with an opportunity to extend terms, maybe 12 months, maybe 36 months, and say, hey, you know what, Mr. Customer, if you sign this contract right now, I'll knock off 5% of what we talked about, or 10% of the cost here. But meanwhile, you're making more than that on the back end when we set up the RIs, right? And you know the exact savings you have for the most part, an approximation anyway. So that's really the best way to attack this. Okay. All means you are the client, so we will, adhere to your ask, right? But for the most part, this is the only way we've seen there be no issues on your side. So on the partner side facing the end client, this is the way to alleviate all of that. Obviously, there's still going to be hiccups. There's going to be Microsoft things. There could be a Sherweb hiccup. All that stuff can happen. We're trying to alleviate that, obviously, but this portion here is the one that directly correlates to an end client and directly impacts your bottom line. So now you have to go back with a whole other conversation. If you know what I mean, if the virtual machine didn't work, you might have to eat 12% of the whole RI 2 weeks into the deployment, just because, you didn't give it time to see if it was actually a stable deployment. So that's very important. And that's probably the most important piece is to actually have that kind of be ingrained when you're setting somebody up now. As you're doing a month and pay as you go, even if reservation is the end goal, right? You're doing the RI, still do the legwork to have it in pay as you go for the month to make sure that what you positioned, what was quoted, all that good stuff is all stable. Okay. And that this is exactly the reason for it. Once we purchase it, soon it's going to be very hard to cancel it. It's hard now, but there's no real financial impact, right? But still, it's good to get into the habit of doing this properly. So how do we ensure the profitability? Like I'd mentioned, it's really going to be getting into the pay-as-you-go side first, and then leveraging the reservations after the fact. This here is the kind of the portion to keep in mind, is this can be drilled down to the point that the exact approximate amount that you're saving. So that's where you can start to make executive decisions, right? How you want to play a client. Maybe after that first month, or maybe that the client is going to ask for a specific amount of savings, or you're going against another competitor. Having an idea and going through this process a couple of times where you set them up and you are 100% comfortable with that savings after the fact, that's going to be where you can start to be more aggressive. So okay, well, if this is exactly what you need, Mr. Customer, then I can make some decisions, right? And that, okay, in a month's time when I sign this RI, the next billing cycle, I'm going to save 50%. So I want to beat company X. Let's give him 25 points for the first year. Meanwhile, you've signed him for, you know what I mean? Like, you've signed the RI, the savings is coming. It's just going to allow you to be more intelligent and more aggressive with these. And from a sales standpoint, that's really your leverage. So getting to understand that and making sure that you're doing things properly are going to make it so that you can be more to the forefront with offering it and getting more business in the door. This year, it's mainly just to look at the link. This is a total cost estimator. I'm not going to run through this. If you guys want to kind of touch on the TCO, reach out to us and we'll get you some more details there. And obviously what I just talked about is kind of chaotic, and that's been the complicated, confusing part up into this point, right? For most partners, you're not alone in this by any means. Even Sherweb has been confused, and we've made some hiccups along the way with respect to RIs, which is kind of why we've built out this portion here. So this right now is free for Sherweb partners. Tag, I'll extend it to anybody that comes through the door, right? But just to keep in mind that our partners will get this kind of flexibility, okay? So this here is exclusive to how to unlock the true value of a reserved instance. So with us, what we're going to start doing is kind of walking you through the entirety of the process, but also with the sole purpose of, when we go from point A to point B and we close our first RI, we get our first deal in the door, that you guys are building the expertise to make the sales process after the fact even easier. So what this program entails and what we're actually leveraging here is a consultation. So let's say I'm going to go through what this would look like when you guys brought me an Azure opportunity. Okay. So that consultation piece is going to be myself or one of my counterparts. I'm having a discussion with you, discussing the opportunity, scoping it out, filling in the information, making sure that we know what the current environment is, making sure that you understand what pieces, what components can be touched on. Like I'd mentioned, we need to know where this is. We need to know where the Windows licenses are, all that good stuff. That's when we're going to start doing the analysis on our side. So that'll be when we roll that part out there. That's where you guys are going to get a formalized quote. That quote will be showing the 1 year or the 3 year or whatever we discussed, but it's going to be leading with the pay-as-you-go side, right? So what we're going to do there is actually build it out. So we'll show you what the pay-as-you-go deployment is, and then we'll show you what happens if we do a 1 year and what happens if we do a 3 year, to give you an idea of the approximate savings when we go through this, right? Now, obviously, that's where the process and deployment comes in. So let's say we set up the tenant, and you guys are good to go, and you want to follow best practices with us. So we go through that first month, right? We do the first month pay as you go. We're going to handhold you through that setup. And then we're also going to obviously loop back in 30 days and have the discussion. Okay, so now that we've done the pay as you go and you're comfortable with the stability of the tenant, what is your thought process now? Are we looking at a 1 year, a 3 year? What did the client say? Do we need to take anything into account, and kind of deploying an RI solution specifically for your end client? This is a new feature. We're actually going to start doing 14 and 30-day RI spot checks. The reason for that is it's where we've seen a couple of hiccups that have led to some issues. So the 14-day spot check after the RI is applied at this point. So at this point here, we have a reservation in place. Now 14 days after the fact. What the rep is going to do on our side is go through your Azure usage report for the first half of the month, and really do a kind of a deep dive, making sure that the virtual machines were reserved properly, making sure that we see the desired impact. Some of the problems we've had is something as simple as you set up a proxy server when you did the initial deployment and you didn't know that you still had it set up. So 14 days after the fact, you're now getting a server burst that's creating a new virtual machine, and your price is actually, $150 higher than what we had just talked about 14 days ago. Well, that's something we want to know immediately. So that's where we're going to have that discussion and be like, hey, there's actually this problem here. Please go take a look at this. I'll loop in Nerdio if Nerdio needs to be involved, or vice versa. We'll get support involved and we'll get that taken care of, so that at the 14-day mark, we know we have exactly what we had agreed upon. Okay. The 30-day, that's another spot check, and that's going to lead into the bill analysis. So the first time you do one of these, it's complicated. It's complicated to see what the impact actually was. It's complicated to see how you would view that in your bill. So that's where we're going to start doing a complete analysis with you guys. So we'll take the tenant, we'll take your Sherweb bill, and we're actually going to go through it with you and be like, okay, well, this is what we had quoted, pay as you go. Here's the impact of the RI we just put, and here's how you see it on your bill. We'll match all of that up, and it's really to be a guide, right? The reason for that is we're noticing once people have done it properly one time and set it up properly and went through the totality of the process, it's easier for them to sell it, and they're also getting more aggressive. So they're actually spinning up and making more margin. So they're extending 36-month contracts because they're more comfortable positioning it. They're more comfortable when they do the initial rollout. And we're also working on a guidebook that'll kind of give you the bits and pieces of what we briefly touched on today, but more importantly, this process here. And that's going to be something that's available in the coming months as well to our partner base. So these are the last two slides I have before we get into any questions. So the main thing is when you set up an RI with us, you get an e-consent form. Once that's signed, there is some invoices potentially to be paid. Maybe you bought the RI up front. Maybe there's some upfront service fees for Windows OS licenses, something like that. Once this is signed and the payment is done, we go into effect to set up the reservation. So right here, we're setting up the reservation. So until this form is signed, it's kind of the onus on both sides. Okay. So if we've extended the quote, you've liked everything you saw, you have not gotten the DocuSign, let your account manager know, let myself know, because nothing has started as of yet. Okay. Nothing started until we have the contract piece, because we need to get this signed and we need to send it along to Microsoft. So until that portion happens, nothing has got set up. Okay. So once this is signed, then we deal with the initial payments, and that's when everything is verified, everything's good to go, and we're off and running. Sometimes partners feel that when we've had the discussion and then email gets sent saying I'm good to go here, that we're good. There's still the contract piece. So we just need to make sure that this is done. And if it's on our side a delay, or your side, whatever the case may be, no fault on either side, but just we need to both stay in communication there until that portion is done 100% of the time. This here, if no slides, if you don't take anything away from what I talked about today, this is really the guide to follow moving forward. So you have RIs, you have existing clients, and you have new clients. You might even have existing clients on Azure elsewhere or with us. When you're looking at an RI and it's new, we very much think that you need to do 1 month pay as you go. That'll allow you to optimize the environment and get a quote properly done, and it will allow you to select one of these two. So these are the two different. When you're experienced, we have a way we want you to follow. When you're not experienced, we have something we'd like you to go through. The experience section, that's somebody who doesn't need our help anymore, okay? They only need our help from a billing standpoint. They only need our help from deploying it. They don't need us to go through, you know, and have a complete conversation. And you can fall under whichever bracket you want. So here we just need the confirmation of the pieces, right? So the virtual machine, the location, what is included, OS and SQL, and then we'll build out the configuration and then send it to you, and you'll stamp it and we're good to go. Then we'll send the e-consent form. Here, if you're not so experienced and you want to really deep dive, that's going to be more along the line of that run through. Typically after one, you'll have your bearings, but by all means, feel free to stay in this the entirety of your RI deployment, just to make sure you're safe. Even if we brought in 10 clients, do not mind to have people stay in this bucket where we're really doing kind of a handhold approach, where we're going through making sure that, you know, the optimization or the RI that we're putting in place is best practice, and kind of walking you through that. And some people will need this specifically to have a more intelligent conversation with their end client. And by all means, we're here for that. So,
Mike, thank you so much. You know, this has been recorded. Nice job, by the way. I mean, it's cleared up a lot of confusion, I think, for some of us. But the real nice thing about this, Mike, is you've given us a nice roadmap of direction and knowing where to go and how to ask questions. So, you know, and I'm sure we have some questions here. And Lane, I don't know, before we get into the questions, is there anything that you'd like to add to this, Lane? I mean, you've been working pretty close with a lot of our tag members in this transition. So you got anything here to want to input to this?
Well, I guess I would say the biggest thing is have patience and reach out to those of us that can help you. Don't just go blindly and then get frustrated. So, you know, there's a lot of us here that have been working on this for a couple of years now. So we can help you navigate this. So especially if it's your first opportunity, really do reach out and work closely with either me or Michael or the folks at Nerdio, whoever you need. We've got a lot of folks here that can help you. So.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions? Or, you know, this recording will be sent to everybody. It will be on the website. And then Janet, just make sure we get it sent to all participants, and then definitely have contact information for the members, who they need to contact at Sherweb, and work with Lane and Ryan and myself as you go into that sales process with Azure. We've been seeing some real success moving this product forward. So, you know, just get in there, get wet, get an understanding. As everything that we look at, maybe the first transition you make is your own facilities. We've just, you know, as everything is, you know, why would you not be up on Azure? All right. Ask that question. Let's start with that. You know, if you jack it up, at least you're only jacking up your own business, not somebody else's. So it's a learning experience. I don't know.
It's a good way to word it. Yeah. And anybody
Also-
coming from the copier space too, a lot of you guys have document management software that's sitting on servers in your office. That's a good reference point too, potentially, to look at putting that into Azure and then applying the reservation. Obviously, it's something you've already used for, you know, a long period of time. So, you know, the contract of 36 months is not scary. It's you, right? You're not going to pay yourself. So that's kind of a good referencing point. But just like Dale said, obviously starting with something internal is always best. And it'll kind of help you from a learning standpoint as well.
Also, if I may add, also RI is not an all or nothing approach. So when you talk with customers, sometimes you want to move and lift and shift everything you got to Azure. But if you know that some server will be migrated to a SaaS application later on, you can apply the RI to the other server, and those one you don't touch because you know those one will be decommissioned in 8 months, for example. So it's not it's really a per VM decision that we make. So you really need to talk about the business needs and the long-term project and the future plan of the customers.
Correct. And one other point too. I was speaking to Blue Fox, and Eric does this a little differently. So while he has RIs, he only RIs specific things. So just to keep in mind, so you have the flexibility, right? With Azure, you can actually auto scale. Some of the Nerdio allows you to do that pretty easily. So auto scaling is pretty smart. So if you run into a client that's 8 to 5, you can set up that Nerdio license to only have it running from, let's say, 7:30 to 6 p.m., right? And not on weekends. So the RI is beneficial because it's a month straight of consumption. You're running full pin for an entirety of the month. If you don't need that, there are options. So you might have 2 machines that run constantly and 2 machines that are only in use from 8 to 5. Like there's a lot of flexibility. So don't just assume that you need to, reserve everything and, oh my God, now I'm locked in. What do I do? There are different ways that we can kind of pick and choose what we do here to make sure that it's the best benefit for you. Because at the end of the day, all of this savings that we're talking about, auto scaling, all of that good stuff, that's all your bottom line. It's not so much the end client. Okay. So just to
And then,
keep
Mike,
that
can
in
we
mind.
can we talk a little bit about the 3 different storage capacity, the cool storage and how to control storage, because that's also another heavy expense on this if we don't understand the ins and outs of that. Maybe that's another web share or not, but I mean,
Yeah. So typically that would be good. If they had an opportunity to come, we can explain that, because it is kind of diving into a specific environment. But kind of what he's getting at is some machines will take SSD storage, some machines will take lower levels of that. There's a huge price discrepancy in those. One of the other things that's really weird is if you spin up an additional, like let's say we have 2 machines on and you reserve them both. One of the biggest problems we have is if you ever get a server burst, Microsoft just happy to throw another virtual machine on top, and that's where you'll get a huge spike. And you may not even be using that much of the actual new virtual machine, but you could see a $200 charge just because you're using a very, very small amount of RAM more than the 2 things you RI'd. But that additional usage has nowhere to go. So Microsoft goes server burst, spins up a new server, and you're paying for the whole server. So there's little things like that we can start to get in. So it's just kind of a feel out process for the most part. So what Dale just mentioned, when we do that initial quote, that's where we can have those discussions to dive into what's actually needed, what's best practices. Sometime Microsoft will have, you need SSD on this specific machine. There is no ands or buts about it. So it just depends there.
And the only other thing I want to mention here is that, Microsoft continually comes out with their programs, new programs and spiffs and whatever the case may be. That's why it's really important to make sure you're putting these deals together with the right, sources, because a lot of times we don't get access to what those things are, and they have access of knowing exactly what those spiffs are, how long they're going to go for, and how they interplay into that quote that you're building.
Yep, and just to piggyback off that, this Azure Unleashed program will lead into some promotional events in the coming months. It's we're trying to really roll out best practices, and then once we've got our bearings there, start to apply some monetary fees to really help us spruce it up a bit and speed it up. Another thing too to keep in mind, you might see some stuff via marketing, but we will have an Office 365 promotion coming in the coming months as well. So that'll have kind of 3 components to it, but it's our most aggressive one yet. So there's some potential to make 5, 10, 15 grand there. So when you see that, if you have questions, loop back to me, and I'd be more than happy to help you out.
Okay, my last question or my last comment is that a lot of times we run into flat networks, guys, and there is a solution for a flat network that's fairly economical that sets up differently. Need to be aware of it. Once again, if you have a flat network, get hold of them and just explain the environment to them.
Yep, for sure. For sure.
Questions or comments, guys? Anybody want to make a comment here before our 1 o'clock cutoff here? Okay. Mike, thank you so much. Charles, thank you. Catherine, thank you so much. We appreciate your partnership. We appreciate everything you do and for us and with us. And I've asked Sherweb to reach out to all participants to talk to you directly. So you should be receiving a call here in an outreach from Sherweb. So thanks, guys.
For
Thank
sure.
you, Dale.
Have a
Thank
good
you
rest
for
of the
having
day.
us.
Thank
All right,
you.
guys.
Thank you.